Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today we are going over my top 5 most nerfed into the ground, premiums that have been nerfed by Wargaming quite hard list. Not exactly sure what I'm going to title this video just yet. So these are 5 premiums that have been hit very hard with the nerf bat or the nerf hammer by Ouija. And these ships, I mean, shoot, if you were around when these ships were originally released and at their full strength, they were quite some fearsome opponents to go up against. Before we get into the list, however, please make sure to drop a like on this video and leave a comment down below. 80% of YouTube nowadays is just finessing the algorithm, and the algorithm likes to see likes and comments on videos, and that's just the way it is. So please drop a like and leave a comment down below if you don't mind. Also, yesterday I uploaded a video talking about World War II era battle rifles. Again, I'm trying to bring some more diverse content to the channel, so if you're into that type of stuff, please go check that out. Link to that is in the description down below. Alright, on to the list. So coming in at number 5 is the Tier 10 Premium Soviet Light Cruiser, the Smolensk. And if you think this thing's bad today, oh boy! Smolensk of her original release was God. Just one of the most painful and annoying ships to go up against. She was in last week's video too, because even still today she's very annoying to fight against, but nowhere near as nuts as she used to be back in the day. So when this ship first came out, 2 things hadn't happened yet. 1, the changes to IFHE, and 2, the commander rework. So Smolensk could, back in the day, with a proper build, get her guns out to 19 kilometers. That's right. This light cruiser got her guns out to 19 kilometers. And keep in mind, since this is a tier 10 ship, this ship can and will see tier 8 battleships. And most tier 8 battleships, their range tops out around 18-ish kilometers. You got a couple that do have 20-plus kilometer ranges, but in most cases, that's things like the North Carolina with terrible gun ballistics at that range, so they don't really have much of a chance of actually hitting that ship at that range. So yes, this is a light cruiser that outranged most, well not most, but a good chunk of battleships it could see. And back in the day too, IFHE hadn't been reworked yet, so you could get her guns over the threshold, 32 millimeter threshold, and you only took a 25% hit to your fire chance. So you could have essentially the best of both worlds with the Smolensk. You could get the pin, and you still had a pretty good fire chance, especially with the rate of fire that the Smolensk has. Now, obviously, once those 2 changes hit the servers, the Smolensk just instantly became much less effective than it used to be. Nowadays, if you want to get her guns out, the first you can get them out to is 16 kilometers, and that's by taking the range mod rather than the reload module. So keep in mind too, 19 kilometers was with the range mod and then the commander skills and such. You can still get her out to like, I think 17 and change with just the commander skills, and you can take the reload module, and then you can have a very fast firing Smolensk. But nowadays, again, if you want to get a 16 kilometer Smolensk, you gotta take the range mod, which of course does take a hit to your RPM, so there's that. So the ship is much more well balanced nowadays than it was back in the day. Oh, and IFHE too. You want to take IFHE now, it's now a 50% hit to your fire chance. So, I mean, granted, I never really have problems starting fires in the Smolensk, even with IFHE. Again, she is a 16-gun light cruiser, so you're just throwing an absolute wall of shells at the enemy team. You're going to be setting quite a few fires there either way today, but yes, a ship that has gone from being just wholeheartedly, in my opinion, overpowered to just being on the better side today. Like, don't get me wrong, this is still a pretty good ship, and it's why it's at number 5, because it's still quite effective. So, she is a ship that many do try to get as well, like during the current Christmas container event. But yes, she has been hit quite hard with the nerf bat. No more 19 kilometer Smolensk, thank the Lord Jesus Almighty. Alright, going down to number 4, we have the Tier 8 Premium American Aircraft Carrier, the Enterprise. Man, another ship that has been absolutely schwacked by the nerf hammer. Now, it's kind of in the same boat as Smolensk in that she didn't receive any direct nerfs. It was just all the global changes that we had between the CV rework and today have absolutely just murdered this thing. So Enterprise is a very old ship in the game. She came out when we still had RTS CVs, and was without a shadow of a doubt probably the most busted ship in the game. Her striking power was insane. She could, in a lot of cases, one-tap cruisers with one pass of her AP dive bombers if the stars aligned and the bombs all fell correctly. She had a very large reserve of planes, and yeah. Again, RTS CVs as a whole were kind of cracked, and the Enterprise was one of the most cracked out of the cracked CVs back in the day. Now, when the CV rework did happen, the Enterprise was still quite good. Her torpedo bombers are probably one of her better features, and even still today. And again, when they first had the CV rework, they were pretty consistent, and they're one of her only munition types that have managed to stay consistent throughout this whole thing. Her AP dive bombers still could absolutely slaughter cruisers. Now, they couldn't absolutely vibe check them like they could back in the day with the RTS CVs, but still, after the CV rework, you could easily remove half of a cruiser's HP with her AP dive bombers, especially considering this is a Tier 8 CV, and you can see, Tier 6 games if matchmaking is that unkind to the enemy ships. And her rocket planes were, again, good, consistent damage like we talked about with rocket planes. But then as time went on, we got things like the fire delay nerf for the rocket planes, where it was much harder to get rockets on target, to where it basically made targeting DDs just an insane chore now. And then we had changes like the global speed nerf to planes. We had, I don't know how many radical changes we had throughout the CV rework season. And it's kind of chilled out today with all these changes. I mean, again, there were so many changes. If you were around after 8.0 dropped, which was the CV rework, we had just hotfix after hotfix after hotfix after hotfix. And it was like we were still beta testing CVs. So at the end of all of that, what we have today is a ship that is still pretty darn good, but it is not the Enterprise of old. So if you're trying to throw your money at the event right now, at the Sand Container event, and get an Enterprise, just know that yes, it's still a pretty darn good CV, but it's not that Enterprise that everyone's talking about on those forum posts from, 3 or 4 years ago. It's still a good ship. It's not quite that insane anymore. But yeah, again, if you go back and watch some old Enterprise footage, even from just after the CV rework, and then come back and find a recent Enterprise game, you will see all the changes that has happened between them, and it is a lot. Alright, going on down to number 3, we have the Tier 10 Soviet battleship, the Kremlin. The Kremlin, unlike our first two entries, received directed nerfs, because if you were around, again, when the Soviet battleships came out, this thing was godly. The Kremlin was probably the best embodiment of Russian bias since Stalingrad when she originally released. The whole thing about the Soviet BB line is that they were supposed to be good at close range. They have this gimmick to where the closer you get to the target, the better your dispersion is in layman's terms, and the further away you are from the target, the worse your dispersion is in layman's terms. So that sounds pretty good, you're encouraged to push in. They have a lot of armor, they have the fast damage cons, and Kustazov is a thing where you can get a free damage con and repair a party when your ship falls below 10% of its HP. So the problem was that part about, well, the dispersion being bad at range didn't really seem to affect the Kremlin for the first few months of its existence. Kremlin was decently accurate at any range, and she has 9 457mm 18-inch guns with Soviet shell ballistics, which means that at range, they still hurt like hell. And the fact that she was still able to land most of her shells on target at range meant that she could still clap things at 18, 19, 20 kilometers. And that was painful to play against, because again, 457mm 18-inch. You could overmatch pretty much everything you need to except for 32, which means that cruisers were just not having a good time, nor were some more lightly armored battleships when the Kremlin was first released. Not to mention, too, that the thing is incredibly tanky. Kremlin has some amazing armor, and it's a similar armor scheme to what we see with all the other large Soviet cruisers, so if you stay bowing and angled, you're going to just bounce for days. And not to mention her deck armor is incredibly thick too, so she's immune to a lot of the HE pins that you can see at higher tier until you get some of the very large cruiser caliber guns like the Henri IV. So what happened? Well, they nerfed her Sigma 2 times. They decreased it by 0.1 each time, so they dropped it down by 0.2. They nerfed her dispersion. They nerfed her shell AP alpha, and then they also changed some of the characteristics according to the patch notes. And then, too, it was also really weird. Actually, not then. One of the first changes they did is that they halved her AA mount's health. They decreased it one time, then they decreased it again, to where essentially the AA guns have half the amount of HP that they originally did. Which is very odd. That's the first thing that they did to the Kremlin. It was kind of saying, okay, the only thing that can really counter Kremlin is a CV. That was a very strange decision. Now, the Kremlin actually has really good AA. The issue is that it doesn't stay intact anymore. The Slava has the same AA suite that the Kremlin does, but it has the original HP amount. So if you play in a Slava, you get to experience the original Kremlin AA, which again is pretty good. So that was very weird. Now, that happened with the Kremlin, and then the game kind of devolved into the state that it is today, where Tier 10 matches are mostly played at 16 kilometers plus. So ships like the Kremlin, the GK, those brawling Tier 10 ships just don't really have much of a place anymore in most games. Now, there are some games where, yes, the ships do get that close, but it's not like it was when the Kremlin was released, where we had these close-in engagements that weren't entirely just rare like they are today. So it's a combination of those nerfs and then just the way that the high-tier meta has devolved that the Kremlin is just not really that great anymore. It's still a popular pick and competitive because it is just, again, a tank when in the right situation, but in random battles it's just kind of... unfortunately. Again, you get those games every now and then where you do get to witness the Kremlin in its close-in tanking glory, but yeah. Got hit with the nerf hammer quite hard, and then the years just weren't kind to her. Alright, going down to number 2, we have what I consider to be one of the most busted ships upon its release. That is, the Conqueror. The Conqueror, the Conqueror, the Conqueror. I still don't know how this ship made it out of testing and into the game when it was. The Conqueror was just stupidly busted when she was released. Her citadel below the waterline. Her heel, dry dock heel. She could just reprint 3/4 of her ship, even if she somehow got citadeled. Her guns, amazing. She had 12 16-inch guns, the same 16-inch guns that she has today, with British BBHE, which meant that you are starting a fire pretty much every salvo, just about. And her concealment, you could get this thing down to 11.3 kilometers back in the day. This thing. This giant hulking tier 10 battleship. 11.3 with a full build. That was pretty stupid. And try fighting against that. A ship you can't citadel, but one that can and will set you on fire. One that goes 32 knots so you can't chase it down. One that, if you do turn broadside to just stop dealing with it, it will load a AP and just smack you because it's got short fuse British AP, which is, I guess, kind of sap. So she would absolutely chunk your bow, your stern, and your superstructure for like, easily 15 to 20k. It was just such a pain to fight against because it just burns you down or chunks you to death. It goes undetected when you finally have a shot at it, and you couldn't citadel the thing. And once you've spent, the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes just pounding it down, it presses the T button, and it's got a new ship. Not to mention, too, the A was pretty decent, although it doesn't have any short-range AA. It was, it's not the craziest AA sweep, but it was pretty good, so it was just difficult to deal with all around. Not to mention, too, that if you try to get a DD to deal with it, it has British BBHE and pretty good conceal. So, the DD gets spotted, it's just going to get sent to the Shadow Realm by that HE. Now, it took them a very long time to nerf this ship, but they finally did. So, they raised her citadel, and then they nerfed her heel to where it had like I think a 2-minute cooldown time. And they switched it back to where it has an 80-second cooldown time now, and they bonked her concealment. Like, it still has good concealment. 12.3 kilometers is still very good for a tier 10 battleship. So that was much needed there with the Conqueror, and she still is a pretty good ship today. But again, just those couple of changes took her from being insanely busted to a good ship today. Again, go back, watch some old Conqueror footage, and how do you deal with it? it just melts you. And even if you have something like a Yamato, and you're just punching the thing in the nose, overpinning it, it doesn't care. It didn't care because it could just print back its entire ship, and that heal had an 80-second cooldown time without a citadel. So it was by far one of the most annoying ships in the game to fight against back in the day, and absolutely busted. But again, got the nerf hammer dropped on it quite hard, and here it is today. And finally, we come down to our number 1, which is, of course, the Tier 8 Premium German aircraft carrier, the Graf Zeppelin. This thing has just been, I don't know, I mean, I don't believe that Wargaming hates German ships. We've had a lot of really good German ships released recently, the Schlieffen, the Mecklenburg, the Pommern. But man, they must have something against the Graf Zeppelin. So take everything that I told you guys about the Enterprise, all those big global sweeping global changes to CVs, but you're starting out from a crap aircraft carrier in the first place. So the Graf Zeppelin, first off, this was one of the earlier blunders I remember hearing about and being around for with the release of the Graf Zeppelin. They had one version in testing and one version that the CCs were showing off, and then they swapped it like a couple of weeks before release, so players that weren't, watching videos every day weren't in the loop. And when the Graf Zeppelin got released, it wasn't the one they had seen in videos and such. So that was a whole kerfuffle. She got removed from the store. She didn't return until after the CV rework, which is when I picked her up, and boy, it was hot garbage, and still is hot garbage today. But they just kept nerfing it for some reason. Again, there were global changes, and there were 1 or 2 direct changes to the Graf Zeppelin, which, again, I don't know why they did it. So the direct changes they did turn, and if you've been here for a while, you've heard me talk about the Graf Zeppelin, I don't know how many times. They changed the way that her dive bombers dove. Before, they would dive pretty much straight down onto the target, which is really good. The reticle is a circle, so driving straight down, you can basically drop your 2 massive bombs on the target and get pretty decent consistent hits with those bombs. Then they changed it to where they kind of glide down at a steep angle, which, when you're dropping AP bombs at an angle on an armored target, means that the AP bombs usually bounce off the Citadel armor or bounce off some of the internal armor, and you just get an overpin, rather than the Citadel that you'd like. And then too, they messed with the dispersion of the bombs, where they had a greater chance of going to the outside of the reticle. But they finally buffed that a little while ago to where they swapped it to where they go more towards the center of the reticle, and that's kind of helped. And then again, all those global sweeping changes, the nerf to the plane speed, the Graf Zeppelin and the German CV's thing is that their planes have very low HP, very little plane armor, but the planes themselves are pretty fast, so you can kind of floor it through all the flak, dodge what you can, hurry up, drop your ordnance, and get out of there. But you couldn't do that because they nerfed the global plane speed of all CVs without any compensation to the Graf Zeppelin. So that sucked. And 2, they also nerfed the AP bombs across the board, the amount of damage that they do. So now your 2 giant AP bombs, their damage got nerfed as well. And again, the rocket plane nerf that, of course, made the rockets hard to get on target, and the rockets on the Graf Zeppelin were already not that great in the first place. So forth and so on. You guys see where I am going. Now, the saving grace of the Graf Zeppelin is that she's not really a carrier. She's more of a cruiser with 3 flavors of scout planes, because she does have amazing secondary. She's actually one of the best secondary boats in the game. You can easily take on a full-out destroyer, most cruisers you can encounter, as long as you can angle and such. And even like a lot of low-health BBs, you can finish them off with the secondaries. Now, you may not fare that well in the return, but the secondaries on this ship are that good. So, yeah, Graf Zeppelin started out from a place of just being not great and just got absolutely slammed and dragged through the dirt by Wargaming for some reason. Alright guys, that was my top 5 most nerfed ships, or ships that have been nerfed hard as hell. Again, not sure what I'm going to call this video just yet. If you liked the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment down below. If you really enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. I'm on my way to 45,000 subscribers, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. Hope you all have a wonderful Monday and wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.